consciousness, it wasn't real quick.
One matrix is everything. It is all around us.
The aliens were like, coming. Our DNA was split, dude, from the fucking Anunnaki, man.
By the process of elimination, you might determine that we are probably being visited.
Well, you know, maybe some of them did really have some kind of experience or saw something. And
The aliens are like telepathic. I don't even believe this.
From saying extraterrestrials are related to UFOs.
You could potentially come to the same conclusion. It is the that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What's good, fellas?
Yo, what up, man?
Come on, buddy.
Thank you for joining me for our second part of the Anunnaki topic. So just to set the stage a little bit, we'll probably end here on the actual, like, quote-unquote Anunnaki, and then we'll deep dive forward week, like specifics within the story. Not even story, but just premise. Tonight, I'd kind of like to just start with what the Emerald Tablets are, or your guys' interpretations of them as well. So what I gathered from it, I think personally, I know a lot of like religious people would not like this, but I think the Ten Commandments are a direct correlation to what these Emerald Tablets are. You know, they essentially are, lack of better words, a representation of like a stone tablet that helps guide humanity, right? That's kind of how I've taken it, and I can back that up for Christianity with the Ten Commandments, but I can't really explain. What's up, dude? Good to see you, man. I can't really say like in other religions like Buddhism and whatnot, but I do know that like there's a direct correlation between the Ten Commandments and like visually with the Emerald Tablets, and also like what they describe and talk about connects to like South American and like native tribes and their religion, like specifically stories. So I'll just open it up. What do you guys think about that? Whoever wants to take it.
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not super well versed on it, but still very intrigued on discussing the implications of what they say.
Yeah, and I think it's they're old. It's old, pre a lot of religious things that are across the world, and I think a lot of other religions have dated their data in this stuff. I think it contains I don't know, it contains a lot of really interesting stuff.
Sorry, does the mic sound better now?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I just saw that. All right, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Keep going.
Chris. No, you're good. You're good. Go for it.
Oh no, I just wanted to make sure my audio is good, but I actually missed that. Could you repeat what you'd said?
No, I just was saying I think it's old. They're very old, and I think a lot of the world's religious stories and teachings ended up coming from this.
Yeah, I felt that when I was kind of reading through, because I started the book of Thoth, and essentially it starts with the first tablet, and there's a lot of talk between whether or not like through Christianity if Jesus was maybe based off of Thoth, and like they might have been the same person. And again, this stuff is like, so when I was listening to all this stuff, I pretty much gathered that like I could see why, like I'm not a diehard believer, first of all, in this Anunnaki story, but I could see that like if you were religious, that like some people religiously believe this stuff, and the stories are too similar to ignore, you know. And so a lot of this stuff is a higher power is guiding humanity and society. And I think you see a lot of those connections throughout a bunch of different religions. You've got prophets in like the Quran. You've got Quetzalcoatl in the native stuff. And I think to what you were talking about, that like there's a high possibility, because this stuff actually outdates most stories, if you actually, because they're basically like tracking this stuff to be like, I think 50,000 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's old stuff.
Stezo, what are your thoughts on the Emerald tablets?
Just basically on what what you guys are talking about. You can extrapolate a lot of that, different cultures. I also know too that a lot of it's weird how the Arabic, even like the pre-Islam culture pulled up a lot of stuff from that. Um, and I don't know if we discussed this last time, but actually Anunnaki in Arabic means ancestors. So I always thought that was kind of cool how they acknowledge that. But just how they pulled it, and then the Greeks were really big into the emerald, like a lot of stuff. They pulled the Greek gods, how they used a lot of like how they decided how their wisdom and some of the teachings they would spread to men to down. That was all kind of pulled from that too. But I'm still learning, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around, because I'm still learning a lot of it, like all these different cultures, and it's interesting because like this is kind of the stuff I was talking about. That's why I really believe like man has been on Earth a lot longer than what we know, even longer than prehistory. And I'm talking about further back than Younger Dryas, like into the hundreds of thousands of years, and to like close to probably 1,000,000 years. But we don't really know because it's all stories. It's myths and folklore and stuff like that. But yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, that's kind of what I was talking about. That like I could see, like, the similarities these are stories. So like I think the only real thing to take from what I've like listened to is that there's this is 10% of, maybe even less than that. Maybe it's 5% of what actually happened. This, like, in the same way that the Bible and the Quran were written, this is passed down stories.
Yeah.
Written from humans that like from a very long time ago, whether it's 10,000 years, 50,000 years, right?
And it deals with a lot of creation of the universe type stuff. And have you heard the saying, as above, so below, as within, so without?
Yes.
No, I haven't actually.
That's where it came from, these tablets. And it teaches like some hermetic principles like mentalism. I can't correspondence, vibration. I can't remember the other ones, but just it deals a lot with creation of the universe and the earth and people.
Right.
And the macrocosm and the microcosm, like relationship between the universe and the human beings.
So I'm going to share this just for people who don't know, like if this is their first time to them. So like this isn't I don't think this is a fake image. I can pull up some more in a second here, but they do have a physical copy of some of these tablets. And
everything that I was just reading, and it's not much, but everything that I just read was claiming that they haven't been found and aren't confirmed to be real.
okay, so this is maybe this is more speculation than anything.
I think that's like a concept.
So the first, I was going to say, because what I was listening to and reading as well was that the first two there's claimed to be 10 of them, I believe, but there are 2 of them that the Vatican has, which
I'm pretty sure they found it. It's pretty much confirmed they found some of them, maybe not all of them, and there's definitely stuff missing. But as far as the stories from the tablets, I'm pretty sure they've found them.
And like, okay, another thing I want to pull up.
I will cite
I think you're
source
right. It's like three. It's like three of them. I think it is.
I read 2. So like this image is in my like I think that's pretty fake. That's obviously written. Okay, some of these look pretty fucking fake.
Yeah, I don't think any of those are probably real.
No, I don't think there are any images of any real ones.
Probably not,
They're
actually.
all
Yeah,
like
I think you're correct.
Some of these look like they just had like some tin.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I went to Home Depot and sprayed the green paint on it.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I do kind of want to touch on for a second the idea that the Vatican has some stuff there. I mean, so like shit, this is where I need Caleb, but the Vatican having a few of them in their vaults, I would not put past for a second. I mean, once the it was the Romans, right? That pretty much invaded Egypt back then, right? It was I'm sure when the library of Alexandria got like lit up and burnt into flames. Like I doubt like there for sure there's a lot of history that got lost during that, but pretty sure a lot of it got saved too. Not a lot, but a good portion of it got saved and hauled, and who knows where it ended up, but I would put my money on the fact that the Vatican has a lot of that stuff. And then doesn't the Vatican have like a what's that structure called? It's man, why am I forgetting it? I'm talking about the it's like it's a four-sided like pillar goes up, I forget the name. I'm being an idiot right now.
But I can't.
Ark of the Covenant.
No,
it's a. God dang it! I probably look at
it's
a
called
complete retard.
I think it's called a pillar of something.
No, pendulum isn't correct. That's the thing that swings.
No, I'm gonna look. I think
the obelisk.
Obelisk. God
Obelisk,
dang it, dude!
yeah, obelisk.
Fucking complete brain fart. Like there are obelisks. There's an obelisk in the Vatican, if I'm not mistaken. Obelisks we do know like originated, from what I understand, in Egypt. So that's kind of the connection I was trying to make there.
And I kind of want to pull a picture of it.
What, an obelisk?
Yeah, let me pull that up.
I'm sure they got plenty of shit tucked away down there.
Fucking Justin, Slow Joe, already stuttering and losing his place.
Where they got him jacked up on everything, everything under the moon, man.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, that's funny. But yeah, I mean so one of the points that I want to bring up too with the Emerald Tablets in terms of the content that they supposedly talk about are the Great Flood, right? That's one, and they mention Atlantis, which is another kind of obviously on the fringe side.
Mhm.
So but yeah, I mean, okay, so this is in the Vatican, right?
Yeah, this is like in the square of the Vatican. Yep.
There's clearly some connection between Romans, Christianity, and Egypt. Regardless if you want to believe in aliens or not, there's some sort of connection. We know the Vatican has a bunch of shit that they're holding on to in history that they're probably not telling us. So
right.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, I've heard all kinds of stuff about the Vatican.
Yeah, exactly.
Like alien skulls. They know about extraterrestrials, and I mean, there's so much shit about the Vatican that they're controlled by the Illuminati. That they profited off the Holocaust. That they helped Nazi war criminals.
Yeah,
like,
right.
You just go all day long.
Have you ever been to the Vatican or known anyone that's gone there?
No.
Yeah, my dad, my parents.
What'd they say about it when they went?
They're pretty religious. They're pretty Catholic. So most of it was how
Just
beautiful it was. Which
yeah.
I honestly, it probably is stunning when you walk through those ancient buildings there.
Yeah.
I mean, not ancient, but like they're old and
They're
like,
old.
Yeah.
yeah. So, dog, I want to read off what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so I just did a. I mean, it's a wiki, so take what you will.
Yeah.
I just looked up the Emerald tablets, and it has these three here. I have no idea how to pronounce all these, but um, yeah, I think you had mentioned two or three, and if this is correct, there's three.
That they have, right? Or supposedly found. Is that what you're?
I am not sure.
So I read that it was two. That the Vatican specifically has two that they have and that they aren't showing. Again, I don't know how valid that is. But I do know that based off of Billy Carson, he was saying that there are supposed to be 13. The whole story of the tablets, it's composed of 13 tablets, but we only have 2 or 3. That's another kind of controversial part. Like, okay, so how do we know this full story, right? If there were only 3 tablets found, but I think part of it is word of mouth and passed down through Sumerian and Mesopotamia.
Yeah, I think in terms of the actual original tablets being found, I think there are some of them missing, but I think the stories had been recorded in other places. So
I think,
there was it?
well, finish that thought, and I think I have something to add to it.
Yeah, I just think that a lot of the stories were just recorded in other places. So we're able to retell them without having the all of the original tablets.
Right.
Yeah. So I think everything. I mean, I'm just skimming right now and scanning, but it appears like the Emerald Tablet is referred to and cited in a lot of these other scriptures and tablets and other cultures.
Yeah, and I think that's that. How can you like? I would argue that every single religion is based off of that, right? And
Yeah.
that's really what I wanted to kind of base this specific episode about is how we've got all of these different religions that connect in different ways. There's some sort of catastrophe, and this, if you believe it, this this is the longest dated story of these different religions, right? And every single culture has a catastrophe story in it, which is why I find the younger Dryas so compelling. Now it's not a little, it's very descriptive as to why in these tablets and the story that there was a war between different beings, essentially. And but that would explain certain anomalies that we have within our own history, like the dating of the pyramids, right? Like
Right.
people like to say it's 6,000 years ago, that they like to quote unquote debunk that how they were made, but the tools don't line up with what they're doing. We also haven't discovered a lot. We have obviously these great big structures, but you have areas like Karahan Tepe that we constantly bring up on these conversations. Karahan Tepe, Göbekli Tepe. We know that there's a bunch of stuff hidden beneath the Americas, and I was listening to the audiobook of the Book of Thoth, and they were talking about Thoth being present in both the Middle East and South America. So, and that would explain Quetzalcoatl, right?
Yep.
And that god. So there's just, I'm not going to sit here and say I like believe it 100%, but I'm not going to sit here and discount it either, right? Because I think we already know too, like when you hear like, well, like it's in human nature to build connections between stories, right? And
Right,
between
yeah.
things as a whole. So I'd love to hear what you guys think about that, because I don't know. I think that's the most compelling stuff about this story, and about the younger Dryas. Like there are these anomalies between history and different storytellings throughout religions.
Yeah. There's a lot of connectivity and a lot of connective tissue between a lot of these stories and cultures and tales. And I don't know, it to me it provides more weight to it. It makes
Right.
it seem more believable, more real.
Yeah, there's a video. Billy Carson breaking it down basically, and he goes through and takes figures from Christianity and stuff like that, and breaks them down, who they are, their names in the tablets, and it's pretty wild shit, man. Especially like the flood, why the flood happened or in the Bible, and why it happens in the tablets, and it's just crazy stuff. A lot of it connects, and that's not the only thing. There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So Mr. Anderson says, what do you guys think about the whole culture of using hallucinogenics to specifically target the release of dimethyltryptamine, DMT? For those who are more familiar with that, in our brains, I don't think we're capable of true understanding.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, that's what I was saying last week. There's these, we can't comprehend 90% of the shit that's right in front of us. We have
So
no idea.
I think that's what's happening with the different UAPs that are floating around, and I think a lot of it's like we can't comprehend what's happening. People like to, I think, revert to government technology that we're not aware of. I think that's a cop out for the most part. There might be some sort of thing like that. Specifically to what Neo is saying is, I'd like to kind of maybe address the fact that there is a thought process out there that Christianity was built upon a pagan religion starting to they found and took. Hey, what's up, Sean? They found,
Fertility ritual, right?
yes, exactly. They were taking the
Psychedelics.
yeah,
Psilocybin.
well, psilocybin, but it's the shoot. Oh, I know the name of it. Manascara is the
Santa Claus mushroom or something.
yeah, here. Oh,
Or I might be mixing.
Amanita muscaria, which is the classic Smurf mushroom. If you guys, I'm sure you guys know that. So there's an idea that Christianity actually started based off of that, and they actually praised, like you talked about, Jim, like a fertility goddess. And that started through taking this psychedelic, and psilocybin, like you had brought up, is one of the main. It's one of the main actual chemicals that are in DMT, so there's a huge connection with that. So I think there's
a big connection between it. I think a lot of those civilizations back then had access to it. They would use like ergot and mix it with wine. There were all kinds of different things like that.
Well,
and they pretty much referred to it as speaking with the gods. Like they knew it wasn't something that they had just started doing. They knew what it did and where it took them, and that's kind of what they referred to it as.
Also, the Vikings, they were known for taking mushrooms or finding mushrooms and like going to war with them, first of all. But they would refer to it as the food of the gods. Native Americans have a terminology like sacred plants, right? And so like marijuana, peyote, right? Just normal mushrooms, like we're talking about. It was a way to connect them to gods. So like, yeah. Neo, I think you bring up a very, very interesting point with this stuff that connects to the religious aspect of it. Now, one thing I kind of sparked my thought process was with DMT, they're constantly seeing like it's a regular site where you take DMT. I haven't done it, but like you smoke DMT, you see gnomes or aliens, right? And I don't know, that could connect to like Tucker Carlson's viewpoint on aliens, where it's like it's a dimensional
Yeah.
tunnel in a so to speak.
Or
So,
fairies are a very common.
but
Where
it's
did the
Yeah.
idea of fairy folk or elfish creatures or stuff like that kind of come from? And
It
even
it
you brought up the Smurfs earlier. There's a good argument to be made that it might actually be
yeah,
known, but the guy was taking mushrooms and stuff. The one who wrote it. So
yeah, it's a trip. I went down a wormhole of people talking about like ayahuasca and DMT, and it's crazy how similar their stories are, and how they all basically say like they could tell they were somewhere, they could tell that they had left where they were at, they were somewhere else, and it felt like a place.
yeah,
But they couldn't really put exact words on it, but these things that met them, whatever the entities were, they were real, I guess. I don't know the word to use, but these people knew for a fact they had left, they were somewhere else, and this was a place, and these things were real, in the simplest way to put it.
yeah. I mean, I think
question is, are we meant to be in that plane?
Yeah, exactly.
well, and that's a whole other thing about the Anunnaki. There's something about how we're not actually supposed to be here from this planet. There's that whole difference between density of our gravity and our planet, and we don't match up to that, which is why we get sick. But before we dive into that, a couple chats I want to hit just because it brings up some good points. Christianity's early rituals were based off of Eastern concepts combined with pagan practices. The hallucinogen part is in the Roman pagan side. And you're totally right, Sean, or Sundowners. You're right. There's a specific pagan side of it from the Romans, but that doesn't really discount the speculation that we're talking about, right? Like, because Romans and Greeks were known to use like what Chris was talking about, ergot, and maybe a lot of these stories did come from just people tripping out, but I part of me thinks that it's stories built off of fact. Does that make sense? That
Yeah, for
like
sure.
there were certain things that were happening way back before even their time, and it just turned into a practice of praising a certain being. If the stuff ended up being true, again, like I'm not going to sit here and say I believe it. I'm just saying there's a possibility, because that's typically how this stuff works in terms of religion and history. You see something you don't understand, and you try to apply what you do know to be real and create an understanding from that. And that's how stories are passed down from generation to generation, right? And then I brought it up in relation to the tablets and interpreting these artifacts in particular, and that's a fair point. Like, who knows? Maybe like if these tablets are real and you could actually read and understand the language that these tablets are written in, which is Sumerian. It's the Sumerian language, which is hieroglyph. So you have to already be knowledgeable in that language. Maybe if you take these hallucinogens and start diving into that stuff, maybe you have a different perspective on it. But it's hard to say. What intrigues me is the ego death aspect. It seems like an out of body experience that can actually change you as a person, and not in the negative way other drugs do, at least from what I've heard.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what some of those people talk about too. Because some people have like a horrible experience because they go into it with an ego like that they can't let go of. You know what I mean? And they just come out of it like trauma because it was such a bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, dope conversation. We fully went off the rails on where we left off in the topic.
We all wanted thinking about the bong bong, man.
Yeah.
Some mushrooms, man.
Yeah.
All that stuff has a lot to do with it, though. I mean, we
Yeah.
did go off the rails, but that stuff is heavily
does
tied
get tied
into
Mhm.
all that ancient stuff.
Yep, definitely.
Oh, dude, don't apologize. You're literally in a chat of a podcast called Aliens Conspiracy. This is what we do.
Yeah. So we
But
do.
you know, I think the vision quests, right, in Native American culture, this goes to, you want to meet the gods, take this, right? And look, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that that's how Christianity started, right? Like they just have
100%.
a different viewpoint on it.
Some
And
speculate that is how it happened.
Was
well,
Moses
and that's
really talking to a burning bush, or was he like, what did he take before he talked to the
Tripping balls, yeah.
well, isn't that part of it that like
The bush was
DMT, from
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
understand, right? Like
Yeah.
it produced DMT. You light the bush, and then you see God, which is
Mhm.
essentially what happens in that scripture.
Yeah.
The bush is on fire, but how do you know it's not like someone having like a pipe and like
Yeah.
lighting
What if
something on fire, right?
light a little crop of some green bud on fire?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sit
Maybe
right
they didn't burn the bush where
Yeah.
it sits. They burned pieces of the bush in a pipe.
And it's in the culture too, like you're burning incense, you're always burning plants and stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, even like the Hindus, man, the Hindus have some crazy stories too that, you know, a lot of people don't talk about, like India and ancient times in India. I mean, that was close to, they go back deep too. In fact, I think Hinduism's older or just as old as like some of the earliest religions, right?
Yeah.
I think it goes back like back to, you know, where they can go back into the thousands of years.
Yeah. And
Or
plus,
organized religion, anyways. You know, where you're talking like that still exists. Like I know it's older than Christianity.
yeah, we look at it from a weird viewpoint too, from
Mhm.
where we're at, opposed to how much more spiritually advanced all these people back then were,
Mhm.
just living a completely different life, in tune with nature, in tune with the earth, in tune with everything. So it's hard for people from our day and age now to really understand and look
Mhm.
at it from the correct way.
Mhm. But you know, like we were talking about earlier, like you're talking about these stories and things like that. I mentioned it last week. You know, you've heard the saying, where there's smoke, there's fire, and
Oh, yeah.
like I mean, you know, there was a long time, you know, up until recently, where they thought all that stuff about like Homer, the Odyssey, the Trojan War, and Achilles, and all that stuff was just basically folklore or Greek myth. And then the archaeologists have found the cities, they found that stuff. Then they found like things like um, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they found these things that were people always thought were myths, and they found them there. These things exist, and you know, it changes perspective on everything. Like, you know, rather than people need to really start thinking about these old stories, like, well, there has to be something to them. Kind of like Damio says, he's like, well, you know, we're only getting maybe talking about 10% of it. Well, you know, yeah, there might be more to it. We need to investigate it. If we got 10%, we need to go and start digging into it, you know?
Well,
Right.
I've always considered myth is literally the product of like it stems from fact.
Right.
So I'm not saying it is fact, but
Right.
like it always comes
happened.
right that they can't explain. I mean, like, so we just did a dragon one, like, and we were talking about the same exact thing, that like it could have just been some giant fucking bird, and
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
saw it and it fucking came down. Or if you really want to get out there, dragons could be a UFO that came down and shot some shit down, right? Like,
Mhm.
and again, we don't have to get off
Fiery.
track onto that, but like, it always stems from something that happened that people saw that they couldn't explain, that they then create into something that through their knowledge at the time, they can then maybe help create some sort of a explanation for something that they don't understand at the time.
Right.
You know?
Yep. Well, it's
I-
just
I-
like it's like Stezo said. Like people have to be willing to dig into these crazy topics that might seem like crazy. You know what I mean? And willing to dig into them to get to a new place of understanding to find out
right.
more information instead of just pigeonholing yourself
Well,
into certain. You know.
and Jim, you just pulled up the different religions. I imagine that what you'd pulled up was the
Yeah, I missed the top 4. That was like the oldest in tiers of like how old they are of established religions. So yeah, look at Hinduism, 15th to 5th, anywhere between 5th to 15th century. You know,
And
that's ridiculous.
why I think this is important to bring up, and I'm glad you did, Jim, is that history, science, and religion, I think, are all intertwined with each other. And why I get so upset with people like that fucking dork, Flint. What's his name? Flint.
Flint Dribble.
Yeah, fucking that fucking idiot, dude. Like, just people like that. I mean, not even him specifically, but like people like that.
They have blinders up, man. They just have blinders up.
Yeah, tunnel vision, right?
Yep.
Refuse to look at it.
Yes, we talked about this the other night. It's the lack of humility of just that your ideals are absolute, and everything else that may be presented to the contrary, or at least challenge it, or whatever, is just brushed to the side. And it's like, nope. We figured this out. It's done. There's nothing to see here. Move on. Quit talking to me. I think you're stupid.
Well, and I think a big problem of that a big problem about this is institutionalism. And they go, I know I went to school for this. I studied this. I'm passionate about this. I don't understand what's next to me. So I'll revert to the people who had the same passion, the same amount of time studying this, and I'll just accept what they say, and so on and so forth. And there's no connective tissue between each of these different institutions, which is why we're coming down to right now where you have people being like, that was debunked, that's not true. But at the end of the day, if you actually start opening yourself up, like what we're talking about, and accepting of these different perspectives, then you can start building a reference, right?
Yeah.
Want the biggest counter to that debunk stuff? Look at the Facebook fact checkers and the social media fact checkers. How wrong they've been so many times.
Right.
And it's because, there's agendas that are hidden. There's a groupthink that's involved. And to be fair to them, we're also not in the field studying this shit. We're not absorbed in it. We're not finding the answers for ourselves. We have to cite other people's work and other people's investigations. But I feel like we have the ability to broaden our horizon and listen to many points of view and take them in and develop a opinion based on that, instead of just being steadfast in a certain belief that you now line up with, which, oh, by the way, usually lines up with other things.
Well, and we're also entertaining the idea, right? And none of us here, I've talked to all of you guys about this stuff. I don't think I've heard either of you guys say ever that like, this is fact, this is true, this is 100. It's always entertaining the idea that this could be possible.
Purpose, preface.
Yep.
This is what I've heard. This is what I found.
You can't move forward or learn more if you have a closed mind. There's just impossible.
The information should be helping you get to a new vantage point, not building a wall in front of you so you can't go any further. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
the bridge.
That's why I don't understand. I don't understand how scientists, like, I get it. Like, maybe you have a specific field in a specific area of expertise where you focused on, and your field, and you worked on that. Maybe there's a subject you're like, passionate about that you've studied, and you're like this, and you had to obviously read other people's findings and research to build your own conclusion. You get there and maybe you spend 30 years on it. You're like, okay, yes, I wrote a paper. This is it. Everybody agrees. They're all pat me on the back now and stuff. And then some guy comes along and says, well, actually,
Wrong. You're fake news.
Exactly. And so you're fake news, wrong. And
Great
then
timing.
you're like, well, wait a second. So he's obviously going to get defensive. But I'll tell you this much: if I was a scientist and I did all that stuff and I was there, if someone came along and said, "Hey, look, actually, you were onto something, but I did this and using your work because they have to use your work as a frame of
Right.
reference to do their work, and we found out there's more to it, or maybe it veers off to another area, pivot to something else." I would be like completely open, like, well, let me see your findings. And I would be like, wow, that is true.
Yeah.
And
Yep,
that's
yep.
happened so many times in not just science, but like math. And that's called discovery. That's age of discovery. And that's
Well,
how humans move forward. And that the problem is nowadays, these
The ego,
institutions,
man.
they're blocked, dude.
These people
well,
get attached to they did it. It's their, they
Mhm.
want to be right, and that's the end all be all.
Again, this is what I find so compelling about the Emerald Tablets and the Anunnaki story is that there are too many connections between other cultures, other parts of history. You've got a great flood story, you have a great catastrophe story, and from all different parts of science and different institutions and history and all that other stuff, it all kind of connects back. Like you've got the you've got similarities between glyphs and structures throughout different periods of times in different areas of the earth. And at the end of the day, it like if you're gonna sit there and like what you're talking about, Cizo, and just say that it's not like, oh yeah, like I don't understand this enough. This is the expert in this area in this field. Well, when you really start kind of looking at this stuff as a big picture, people like Graham Hancock who are doing the actual work on it, like you start really seeing connections between everything, right? And um, I don't know. I think there's just there's something to be said that we're not giving certain perspectives to the time of day that are necessary to actually really push forward in this thought process, which is unfortunate, right?
Super unfortunate, man, because you could pretty much see it happening anytime there's any kind of breakthroughs, and it just gets shoveled down and buried.
Yep. It's very unfortunate because the way my mind works is like if something new like arises, like a more efficient way or a different perspective due to a new discovery comes up, like I'd be fucking excited. Like, oh shit, we got something new for this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe it's
Man,
not what we thought. Like, I'd be so pumped, so
okay,
excited.
when those hearings started to happen with Grush,
Yeah.
what were your guys' thoughts? Because I was like skeptical, like let's see how this goes, but at the same time, the other side of me was like, damn, Congress is starting to fucking
Right.
the U.S. Congress is getting involved now
Yeah.
into this world.
I was hype. It was happening.
I couldn't
Now
help but feel like there was
deciphering
a sleight of
which.
hand going on or something.
Oh yeah. Deciphering which is disinformation and bullshit compared to like actual true stuff is one thing, but just the fact that it was actually happening, it's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
That's just being talked about, discussed. It's like,
Yeah.
because like my big thing was like, why now? Why right now? And it almost seems like it was funny at the timing. Like if you remember in 2017 when they showed those, the Tic Tac video and the naval footage and stuff, it kind of slid under the radar, even though it was on New York Times. I remember seeing like a headline about it, and I was like, dude, this is going to get brushed under the rug, and it did. But then it got resurfaced during COVID, because everyone was all over, hyped on that and stuff. And it like came out, was like trying to be important, and it got forgotten about again. I really think that it came out was really on purpose to see like what society could handle, what would we think about it. And then, I think because it's always been a fear, they don't want people to panic. And I get it. Like who wants to say, well, we don't know what these things are, but they fly over our country every single night. And they could be dangerous. It's kind of like the COVID thing. Like they didn't know. They didn't know. So why not say they didn't want to say they didn't know, because people would have been panicking. You think it was bad when people were mad that we had to wear masks and we were locked up and stuff like that? Because what they told us what would happen didn't happen. But if they wouldn't have, could you imagine if it was like fucking Ebola or something? People were dropping, lying dead in the streets, and they just like left everything open. What the response would be? So it's kind of one of those things. They're kind of testing the waters, and I think now that the cat's out of the bag, I still don't think we're getting. There's too much of this kind of like, well, because even the guys, even the governments, the congressmen, and all these guys are admitting like, we're getting kind of like partial information. We're not getting all the information that we should be getting. And it's going to continue that way, I think, until there's like this big, like bombshell whistleblower thing that just like that it's too incredible to ignore, or a spaceship lands on the freaking White House garden. I
don't think they're ever going to disclose it. I think that's how it's going to happen. Like you just said, someone's going to find out the info, leak something. The government's never going to come out and do it.
And this just isn't a U.S. thing.
So
it's got something going on.
It's crazy, bro. It's crazy that the whole. I go back to that Tucker Carlson thing, man. It scared him so fucking bad. He didn't want anything else to do with it. He stopped looking into it. Whatever he was finding, scared the shit out of him. So he said it's
even Trump's statement too.
Well,
like think about that. He had credible people.
No,
what's up?
Trump's statement, how he was like, if you knew what I knew,
fuck yeah, man.
You wouldn't release it either. Which is almost what I'm like, okay, are the Anunnaki real? Now that I'm looking into this stuff, I'm like, oh shit.
Although actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that was about the JFK.
Oh, you're right. But still, I mean, okay, so there's been multiple presidents though, like Nixon. I think he learned about the stuff and he also didn't release it. Like I think Clinton as well. That was another one, but I want to hit this because this goes exactly to what we were just talking about. I think people are more open to ideas that that historically have been controlled by government, and since COVID, people have started opening their eyes, and I think that's why we actually have started. People are starting to be more accepting of this stuff.
Right.
This is why Congress has finally, like, whether or not you want to release the information, when you have Congress and you have high people in government and in the military finally opening up and whistleblowing, like it's undeniable that there's a level of like, we sat through the whole COVID pandemic, and we could probably handle a little bit of this type of stuff. But again, it's.
Well, I think that COVID was the COVID stuff was eye opening for a lot of people and all the aftermath of that. And I think people are at a point now. You could tell by how popular everything is. Just all the conspiracy channels or this and that. People are really hungry to understand what's going on and just find out the truth. And I think you'd be surprised how many people would be willing to honestly accept even crazy shit as long as they knew it was true.
Right. And it is hard. Like a lot of these people touching on aliens and conspiracy theories, like it's starting to really like blow up, not even just on YouTube, just in general. People are starting to be a little bit more accepting of these topics, right? Because I mean, you guys, you and Stezo grew up probably in a time when, like, this just wasn't talked about in public
you had to dig.
or on TV. Right?
Yeah, you had to dig, man. It was what you got on the news and the newspaper, and that was it. Other than that, dude, I mean, you had to dig because there was no.
You're a nutcase, right? Like if
for real. Yeah, and it was so.
Yeah, go ahead.
You've been checking out the tabloids and the
supermarket
aisles.
Yeah, I was kind of fortunate location wise where I kind of grew up. I grew up in an area not too far from where all this weird shit kind of happens, in Northern California. Like I'm literally.
Are you Shasta area? Not to dox you.
Yeah, in that area. So like where I hunt and where I grew up in the woods, like I can literally rock throw to Bigfoot country. I grew up and I hunt every year near Mount Shasta, that area, and I've been there many, many times.
Go camp up at the top of Mount Shasta?
No, I hiked up it once. I hiked it when I was a lot younger, And like I said, I could tell you some stories of people I met and stuff up there.
Fuck,
There's
bro.
really one path that you can take to the very top and not have any issues. But every year there's people that try to veer off and then cut off on these like more risky places, and either they fall and get injured or die or get stuck and they have to get rescued
Or get abducted.
well no, there's been people that have gone up there and disappeared. Like some of the here's the thing, some of the stories that I've talked to the locals about, when you talk to the locals a lot, if you're just passing through and you talk to some people, like, wow, these people have been doing too much, like whatever. But when you talk to some grounded people, they're like, yeah, there's a lot of like, crystal worshipers up there and like hippies and whatnot. Like I think per capita, Mount Shasta is like has the most religions in the world or something like that. No, I'm dead serious.
I know, it's just funny.
But when you go there and you talk to the locals that grew up there, like multiple generations have been there, there's stories, and the stories like are kind of like we talked about, like where there's smoke, there's fire. Like they talk about locals, people have gone up there and had experiences. The local tribes have had experiences, and basically the rule is don't mess around on Mount Shasta above the tree line.
Right.
Do not mess with that mountain. It is sacred to the Native Americans. They've warned people to go up there. People have gone up there and had issues and stuff because there's stuff going on.
Well, I would maybe even next week. Let's do a.
I got a story, but we can save it for a third one or something else. It's really deep. I spoke to somebody, they told me some shit.
I just listened to something about Lemuria. And
that ties in with Shasta exactly.
Exactly. So I think we have our episode for next week, because I've spent time in Reading just for like tournaments for sports and whatnot. And I'm aware of the area, just don't really know it. You sound like you're a local to it. Mm-hmm. I think we should do that one because it does tie into the Atlantis stuff and whatnot. It'd be kind of a fun one to dive into. But that's a very interesting area. And even surrounding Shasta, there are like volcanic mountains and stuff.
Oh yeah, Mount Shasta.
Not mountains, but like there's that one like right near Weed, California.
That's a cinder cone.
Funny. That you know what I'm talking about, right? The cone-looking hill.
Yeah, that's
isn't
just
that
a cinder cone.
It's volcanic, right? Though.
Oh yeah, it's a cinder cone. It's part of the whole thing. And then if you go, actually 40 miles east, I think it is, of Reading, there's Lassen Peak, and that's active, and there's a lot of stuff going on out there too, but
we should dive into that.
California is a unique place. It's not like when people think of California, you don't think of Northern California.
I try to tell people that, but they see too many things on CNN and they think it's just all crackheads, but it's not.
Well, there's everywhere. They're everywhere in California now, man. There's
per capita.
Yeah,
everyone's shitting in the street.
Per capita, you got the meth heads, but
oh my God.
No, you got it's like growing up because I grew up in the area, right? So
yeah, man,
I'm very familiar with it. I personally never had any experience, but I've talked to people that have, and like some were like, yeah, whatever. They were probably on that, that good stuff, but other people,
some were probably bullshit.
Probably other people are pretty credible, and like I have respect for them. I'm like, there's no reason why they'd make that shit up.
Well, Stezo, as you know, I don't know where you stand on this, but I was raised in the limbo between Northern and Southern California. Like what is the Bay Area? We're Northern California, but
Central California. Well, there's people trying to always move the border. Last I heard was north of Fresno is Northern California. I'm like, dude, that's Central California.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like I've heard like actual Northern Californians say like, oh, Bay Area isn't Northern California, but then Southern California doesn't accept us, but I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's definitely like a border war and stuff like
that. I
mean, the North remembers, like in Game of Thrones, the North remembers. Yeah, Northern California members, they know what's Northern California. So
exactly.
But yeah, it's like a whole different world. I mean, it's up in this whole vicinity up here. You would say it's Trump country. Like you're not going to find people too many Biden voters up here. I would go ahead and take like some. I think couple of the counties up here were higher than like some of the top 10 voters in the last election, we're talking like 70+%, 80%.
Well, it's the concentrated areas in
Yeah,
California
exactly.
that makes
It's all like, yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, it's definitely a unique area, and there's a lot of history up here too. But we could talk about that another time.
well, but there's also like legitimate like alien shit that happens. Oh yeah, Chris, you're echoing a little bit.
I'm echoing.
A lot of it, I think. Yeah, it's gone now. Oh, weird. Yeah, but there's a lot of like alien stuff that happens in that Nevada area, Central California, and also
All over.
Northern California. And you know, Northern California is big. Like you said, it's Bigfoot country. Like there.
Yeah,
Can you
and
hear me?
like I said, there's enough.
Yeah, I hear you, Chris.
I've literally been out hunting before and met people in these mountains like that were wilderness areas, and they literally were like nothing caught. I mean, we're talking rednecks, right? Like,
Oh
are you
yeah.
from here, and they got accents and everything. You're like, dude, am I in California or Oklahoma? And it's like, no, they're like, and they're good old boys. They're good people. You just tell me, hey, I'm from here. And they're like, they leave you on your hunt and say, well, right down there, I saw Bigfoot like 6 months ago. And you're like, oh really, wow, that's cool. And you don't want to be like, yeah, right, because they'll like you might end up on like for dinner that night. But anyway, or
Might be the next
big. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things you can talk about. Yeah, the whole Mount Shasta, Lemur, Atlanta story. Something else I was going to bring about the whole Lemuria thing too. Did you know the British? I don't know what you call them. The Commonwealth, whatever, is referring to its islands in the Pacific now is the islands of Lemur.
No.
Yeah, they've started renaming them that. I thought that was kind of awkward. Like, so when you think about like Fiji and all those places like that are, under the English Commonwealth, they're starting to call them the like Lemur Islands or whatever, or like the Commonwealth. It's like weird. They just would start naming them that.
Yeah, some of those. I heard something about that too, and if you go look at the ancient maps from back then, some of the mapping was crazy. The land masses that aren't around anymore.
Right. Like Mew, like was part of China and all that stuff, and yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. Like I said, that's a whole nother thing to get into, and it's way ancient, but kind of predates like a lot of stuff. But like that's what I was talking about. Civilizations that we talk about, like the first known like civilization that's recognized in history is Sumeria and all that. And we talk about that, but we're now talking about going back to civilizations that are forgotten, didn't exist. And it's like, I think that's where you run into that stuff and you hear those stories. And you're like, well, there's something about those stories. They may be real.
Well, if they say those stories go back, supposedly some of them, how far, like 500,000 years?
Yeah.
Like, 10,000 years is just, you're scratching the surface. If there's really history going back, 500,000-600,000 years.
Yeah, well, just on our time scale.
Believe it or not, the Lemuria and like Atlantis stuff it's all supposedly it's all in the tablets.
It's in the Emerald tablets, yeah.
And that's where that's why I even brought it up in the first place. Like it's wild to even think about that, like the supposed conspiracy theory about these tablets that somehow connect to Egypt, the oldest culture we know. And also Sumeria, which is actually the oldest one, but and Atlantis, another huge point in conspiracy theories that supposedly isn't real, connects to California, Northern California. It's just, and then also Southern America, too many, and that's really the point I wanted to make across this conversation tonight is that what is so compelling about the Emerald tablets, something that's not supposed to be real, connects everything in culture. And I don't think it's just people looking for coincidences, or coincidences. It's actual, they can kind of back it up in a sense through different deities, through different gods or prophets, and then also structures in different areas throughout the world. And whether or not you believe in Atlantis, there is clearly some sort of a advanced culture. I don't know if they had flying cars and crazy anti-gravity technology, Right, but there's a correlation between all these different points in history and cultures, and that's really the fascinating part that I like to entertain in this stuff. And again, like, you don't have to believe it, but I'm gonna entertain the idea, right, for a little bit at least.
Absolutely. Why not? I mean, there's just too many stories. Like I said, I mean, you talk about these stories were passed around about Atlantis by like the Greek philosophers, just like the stories of Homer and the Odyssey and all that stuff, like these other ancient stories. And so why not? Why can they find out that they just haven't got around to finding it yet? But then again, how many people are actually looking? You know what I mean? We don't put our energies, and that was one of the things that Graham Norton was talking about. I was like, we don't spend time or the energies to go look for these things, so they get passed off as there's not enough evidence. Well, if you haven't found, there's got to be something there, like you got to keep looking. And that was that Dingleberry was arguing with them about, like, we looked at the coastlines, like, well,
Coastlines change.
the coastlines change after time, it's like the coastlines.
Also, how much? That was Graham's point too.
Yeah.
How much coastline have you?
Yeah.
Well, I think Graham's bet, like when they were doing that debate, his best argument was when Dibble was trying to like debunk all the things that were under the surface of the ocean. Graham was like, "Have you been down there? Because I have." And that's where I was like, like he's calling you out like straightforwardly, like I dived down there in Japan. You didn't go down there, like you're sitting there behind your computer in a safe space, citing people that or maybe mutually know and don't even.
His dad, he wouldn't shut up about his dad's work. My dad's work. My dad's work. I'm like, bro, shut the fuck up.
Have you seen the recent, like, the art? I think it's been over the last couple of years where there's scientists now trying to and this is just a simple thing, but it's kind of on topic what we're talking about, where they're trying to make like basically New Zealand the 8th continent, because if they finally went ahead and got all the mapping underwater, and it's basically just sticking above the water like Hawaii is, but it sits on a giant table of like multiple faults that are moving, they're sliding.
It's like
just
its own
you have anywhere else. Yeah, and it's called Zealandia. And you look underwater, it's been mapped, and it's like it looks like it should be a continent, but most of it's underwater, right? So, but there's people arguing saying, "Oh, it doesn't fit all the things of a." Of this and that. So I thought that was kind of funny, because I was like, well, to me, when you look at like the actual map and stuff like that, yeah, you just have New Zealand sticking out of the water, but there's other stuff underwater that looks like it's just a submerged continent to me. I don't know.
I mean,
who knows how much the water levels have changed.
Yeah, I mean, not only
it's very volcanic, it's an active area too. There's like 3 major fault lines that go right in there, plates, and that's why it's so seismically active. They have earthquakes, there's volcanoes down there.
Also, if you have a catastrophe like the Younger Dryas, that would sink land levels. It would sink them, and then also it would raise water in different areas if that sunk. So I don't think Atlantis, Lemuria, or what you're talking about is out of the realm of possibility. I think they're like, it makes sense to me, at least.
I know Chris knows about, like, where he lives. I know he knows about the Cascadia event, right?
Oh, bro, like there's what's his face? I can't think of his name right now. Graham Hancock's he comes on with him every once in a while.
Randall Carlson.
Yeah. He talks about that up here at the Camas Flats up here. A bunch of the stuff he talks about with the flooding and I go take walks around that lake where all the evidence of the hillsides with all the water erosion. That's right over where I'm at.
Yo, dog, I completely, and I'm enthralled in what.
Is that crazy or what?
Yeah,
that's way bigger than I thought. I had no idea. It blew me away. I was like, "That's a continent, dude!" Like, those are islands just sticking out of the water.
But also, like, the Philippines, they're like, because I'm Filipino, so I know like the Philippines are it's a network of like 20 different islands.
Mhm.
Hawaii's the same. At one point, that was all just one landmass, you know? So it's not like that's not crazy. Like you can back that up with
Right.
science and with, you know, you can just simply look at the depth of the water in between them. Like that at one point was for sure a landmass. And Pacific Islands, we know at one point we're all connected at some, like between the time of now and Pangea. So
Mhm.
like, yeah, how do we know that this stuff wasn't like that's not crazy. That's not a crazy thought to see
No, not at all.
Zealandia. But I'm not gonna lie, when
That's
you said the word Zealandia, I was like, this sounds fucking
It sounds weird. Huh? It's not like conspiracy, but this is real radar map that they've mapped now, and you
for
can
sure.
like have scientific evidence. Like that's sitting on basically just the top of a plateau of a continent, you know.
Yeah.
And so they're just kind of debating it. But it's kind of like the same thing. Like when I was growing up as a kid, Pluto was the ninth planet. Now they've reclassified what a planet is, and so it got kicked out. They got voted off the island as a planet, so it's like a pseudo planet now. You know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, if it does meet the criteria, which I don't know what would make it, meet it, but
Yeah, I didn't get into all that. I didn't read about. I just what I happened was is when I was doing this research on everything. You lead one thing to the next. We got to got to everything. Lemuria, all that stuff, and then it was like, oh, well, Zealandia, and they show these maps. I was like, dude, that's a real thing.
yeah.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, this is an interesting. That's
That's
like
pretty crazy.
it's almost worthy of a full
But
hour.
that's
a
like
full
a
hour
science
to,
thing. That's not even like a, you know what I mean? That just would show you like under water, like he was saying, how much have you actually explored? Like, I mean, that's just a map. But how much of that was actually explored? Maybe there's ancient city ruins down there. No one's looking for that. They're just looking at like, shapes and continents and faults and things like that.
for sure, for sure.
Well,
Oh,
a
dude,
lot of
he had all kinds
Indonesian-
of evidence that he was
Yeah.
pointing out,
Oh yeah.
and he was just Dribble was just shooting it down, calling it bullshit, like really unnatural looking shapes and ruins underwater, and he wouldn't buy it.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about before with institutions. Like he wasn't an expert on it, and so he immediately fell back on people like his dad and like my colleague said that this has been debunked by my colleagues. Which is just it's such bullshit.
comes off
I don't know.
as like it's been debunked because I say so because my sources are so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Because I have more degrees than you do.
Yeah.
Well, look, gentlemen, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little tired tonight. I think we're gonna cut it a little bit shorter than normal. But I appreciate all
Yeah,
three of you guys for showing up
Sure, man.
tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Everybody in
Yeah,
chat, appreciate
Of
you
course,
coming.
yeah, appreciate everyone that showed up to the stream. Next week we'll probably be covering the Lemuria story and Shasta and all that stuff that's happening out there.
Send me some materials.
I got you.
We've got a Shasta native here, so hopefully we'll have a good
got you.
conversation.
Oh,
Yeah.
There's some actually good videos on like if you're interested in like that stuff, Mount Shasta and stuff. Like there's some pretty good videos about it on YouTube and also like Tubi.
Perfect.
They're about an hour long. They're pretty short, but they'll talk about like the big stories that have been known and publicized over the years between like Native Americans and like Western media and stuff, expeditions, things like that. And but yeah, there's other stuff that's not known that's kind of known to the locals that I've heard that is like just as wow, but it is what it's a story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I've heard it from multiple sources. So it's like, okay, well, maybe there's something to that because stories don't just become stories if it's like, unless there's something behind it. So
exactly. Yeah, send me stuff, dude. Link me.
Yeah.
Did you see the Y-Files one, Daimo?
That's what
For
I
the
watched.
Lemuria?
That's
Bro, that was a good one though. That was
that's a good one.
they have a
Anytime-
couple of those that are tied together.
Yeah, look up that. You can actually just Google the stuff or look on YouTube, and
Yeah.
you can find the city of Talos. It's in Mount Shasta,
Okay,
And
I'll watch that.
that's the Lemurian city because that was where the Lemurians went after. Okay, remember this is the story.
Right.
Atlantis destroyed Lemuria, and
Exactly.
then Mu was like kind of like where some of the survivors went, but they lost all the technology yet. Whereas like the people that kind of kept the technology that they did have went underground and were able because they had already made underground tunnels that went under the ocean and stuff and went to places. And they also have the power of portals.
Yeah, and then also the
situation.
whole there was another being, and I remember hearing
Yes.
during that they're still there. That's
Mhm.
that's one of the conspiracies that a lot of the UFOs we're seeing are actually coming from them. But listen, guys, I'm gonna cut it off. This was
Right on.
great conversation, and we will revisit the Anunnaki and all this other stuff
Sweet.
at another time. But again,
Nice.
All right, man.
appreciate it, guys. We
Thank you.
will
Later, guys.
we'll
All
tune
right.
in next week.
All right.
Bye.
Peace out. Later, chat.
Peace.
Later, guys.
See y'all.